Now we will begin the next session on Ayurveda. Today's speaker is Professor Ram Manohar of Amrita Vidyalaya. There is a Advanced Center for Research Academy, and presently he is holding that director's post. He is the director of that institute, doing some innovative research in Ayurveda, and his papers are all known to the Ayurveda people who have been trained in the Ayurveda circles. It is very known. He has written internationally known papers on Ayurveda. Ayurveda, as we know, is the most ancient, medieval and also contemporary system of Indian medicine. Probably one of the very few medical systems. I don't say it is a medical system because it is a healthcare system. And it has about 5th century AD, it was translated into Chinese. And after that it was translated again to Persian and Arabic. And through Arabic it went to the foreign countries, European countries. So it has a hoary past, a long distance going back to almost Atharva Veda, 5,000 years ago. So we will be fortunate to have him here in this seminar, and I request him to deliver his lecture.
Om Akhandamandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Thank you, sir, for the warm introduction, and I would like to thank Professor Sundareswaran sir for inviting me to this national seminar to share my thoughts on Ayurveda and its position as a knowledge system. Now, I am a researcher in the field of Ayurveda and very much involved with its current clinical applications, and I must say that it's not in my expertise to look at Ayurveda from a purely historical perspective, because I have been exploring Ayurveda as a living science, and it is in my journey of research into Ayurveda that I have attempted to make some understanding of its deeper, basis as a knowledge system, and especially how it compares with modern scientific approach to knowledge building and where it differs. Because one of the major challenges that we are facing today in the field of further development of Ayurveda is also appropriate research methodology. So I just want to give a warning at the beginning that this is the perspective from which I'm going to kind of look at this subject. So, the idea that Ayurveda is a knowledge system is kind of inbuilt in the definition itself. And the slides here are actually notes. I mean, they're not very elaborate. They're just kind of a skeleton of what I'm going to talk. But probably, I was not sure that this could be projected. So I just made them to kind of structure my PowerPoints. Yes. So they're just very preliminary, very brief, points. But maybe it will also help you to follow the thought process more effectively. So, of course, very superficially when we say Ayur means life and Veda means knowledge, but when you go deeper into the Sanskrit of it, you get kind of more technical definitions and interpretations. To the extent that, it even looks inappropriate to translate Ayus as life, because because the Sanskrit understanding, when you kind of look at the etymology of the word Ayus, you get a perception which is not captured by the word life, because Ayur means Inagata, it is coming from the root Inagata, which means that which goes away. It comes from the word Gati, and it means many things, that it will eventually disappear. Whatever you do, it's something which is going to go away, So that word includes both life and death. So Ayurveda is the science of living and dying, not just, living. So these are deeper implications that we get when we go into the Sanskrit of it. Gati also means dynamism, movement, that life is not still. It's something which is continuously adapting and changing. And this gati in Ayurveda is also described, like Ayu is described very technically. Sharirendriya sattvatva samyogo dhari jividam nityagascha anubandhascha paryayir ayuruchyate. So that life is trying to preserve itself. Every moment, is a fight against death, destruction. So you see this at the level of the cells. We see this also at the level of reproduction, because every living form reproduces to preserve life, because it's not possible to perpetually preserve your own body. And then the third anubandha, this is called in Ayurveda as anubandha, is the afterlife. So this is also a very important concept. So the word Ayu has a very technical connotations, and classically when we study Ayurveda, we don't give one word definitions. We actually analyze and deconstruct the word to get an insight. And if you look at the word Veda, again, when we say that Ayurveda is a knowledge system, the root Veda, Veda is derived from the root Vida, which has actually 4 meanings. Sattayam vidyade veti jnane vinte vicharane vindade vindadi prapto rupa bheda vide avihi. So Satta means existence, that which has, as was being discussed, the difference between Sat and Satya. Every knowledge is a confrontation with reality. So, if there is no such encounter with reality, there is no knowledge. So, it is not mere imagination. It's an experience, an encounter with reality. So, that is what is meant by the word Satta, Sattayam Vidyade. And that reality that you encounter or experience, we can conceptualize it. So probably that is the difference that was being discussed between Sat and Satyam. When we conceptualize it, but in Ayurveda the word Satyam is also used in the sense of reality itself. So encountering reality, conceptualizing it, and what you conceptualize can be analyzed. That is called vichara. So the 4th meaning is vicharana. And when you do the vicharana of that concept, you come back to square A, that you get the prapti, or you're also once again able to experience. So this is the process of Ayurvedic knowledge, and actually this word Veda represents a knowledge cycle. And in the old traditions, I have learned from some of the teachers and masters that this represents the parampara, the Guru Shishya parampara. The first 2 meanings refer to the Guru, and the second 2 refer to the Shishya. And knowledge is not possible unless there is this connection or transmission from the Guru to the Shishya. This Guru experiences and conceptualizes. The Shishya analyzes and experiences again. And then that knowledge gets validated. So this is very interesting, because today when we say research, it's something outside education. It's in a laboratory that a few specialized individuals are validating knowledge. Whereas if you look at the definition of Veda, Param aparam karoti iti parampara. What is aparam? What is param is made aparam. What is beyond the reach of the student is made within its reach. The student is the proof of the knowledge. The Shishya is the proof of the knowledge. So in Ayurveda it was said that idam agama siddhatvad. It is siddha. Through agama itself it is siddha. The Shishya verifies the knowledge, experiences it, and again it is verified and verified. The moment it is transmitted, it is verified. But today our education is not so. We talk about research culture, that university learning should be research based. But if you really look at research as truth finding, as experiencing truth, then in the very definition of Ayurveda, the way it is interpreted, I mean, it's really research oriented. So this is the knowledge cycle. So Ayurveda has always defined itself as a knowledge system. I don't want to use the word science, because science is really very loaded. Even though science has a general meaning, in the modern context, when we talk about modern science, there are some methodological, epistemological and ontological restrictions that get automatically applied when you use the word science. So I would like to start my discussion positioning Ayurveda as a knowledge system, not at this point entering into a debate whether it is a science or not. Now, how did this knowledge system get derived? When we are looking at Ayurveda, we are looking into the mists of time. We really do not know when and where it originated, because the earliest textbooks are already extremely developed and structured. You have the Charaka Samhita, the Sushruta Samhita, and then several other texts of that period, the Bhela Samhita, which is available only in a partial, it's been just partially preserved. And then you have Kashyapa Samhita, which is one of the oldest textbook on pediatrics. So the period of these texts are very difficult to determine, because they have also been edited several times. There's a history of 1,000 years behind each textbook. Charaka Samhita, for example, was earlier known as the Agnivesha Tantra, and then it was redacted by Charaka, and then missing portions were refilled by Dhritabala, and then it was edited in many other occasions. So what we see is from the Vedic period. There was medicine in the Vedic period. There is a real paradox here, and a lot of historians have debated as to how Ayurveda originated, that Ayurveda is very different from Vedic medicine. And it emerges suddenly on the scene, through the Samhitas of Charaka and Sushruta, to the extent that many Westerners have even proposed that Ayurveda is actually against the Veda. It came through the influence of Buddhism. Its origins are actually anti-Vedic, because Ayurveda has an extremely rational framework, and Vedic medicine was magico-religious and very ritualistic, whereas in Ayurveda we see a sudden shift, and there is actually no connection explaining how Vedic medicine became Ayurveda. So I want to just shed some thoughts on this process. It's still hypothetical. This is a reply to the modern historical assumption that Ayurveda originated from Buddhism and not actually the Vedas. And there's a professor from Denmark, Professor Kenneth Zisk, who is a very vehement proposer of this viewpoint. Now, if you look at the texts themselves, Ayurveda tells that it is Upangam Atharva Vedasya, that it is derived from Atharva Veda. In some contexts, it is also mentioned that it is derived from Rig Veda. Now, through my own, journey as a student of Ayurveda and discussion with many old gurus of Ayurveda, what I understood is that if we get a deeper understanding of what the Vedas mean, then we suddenly see a lot of sense when Ayurveda says that it is part of Atharva Veda, or sometimes it's part of Rig Veda. So in the Vedas, actually, the three Vedas were together known as Trai, and the Atharva Veda stands out separately. So if you look at the three Vedas, Richastutau, Yachdane, Archane, and then Sama is, Samikarane, Jnana. So these represent the three powers of the human being, the Ichha Shakti, the Jnana Shakti, and the Kriya Shakti. And even the Soma Yaga is actually symbolically, the coming together of these three Shaktis. Like when these three Shaktis converge into one point, then there is a very deep transformation in your mind, and you are able to experience reality at a different level of consciousness. So the Trayi represents that awareness, which in Ayurveda is called as prajna. So the ultimate medicine for health in Ayurveda is not any aushadha, or it is prajna. So even when some of the later textbooks talk about this ultimate disease and its cure, even the influence of Buddhism, this word prajna was still retained. So prajna mantra balena yasamidavan buddhaya tasmai namaha. So prajna is the ultimate medicine, and that is where we see the link with the Vedas, that this coming together of Ichcha, Jnana and Kriya Shakti, which in Ayurveda was called Dhi, Dhriti, Smriti, Vibhrashta, Karma Yat Kurude Shubham, Prajnaparadham Tam Vidyad, Sarva Dosha Prakopanam. So this perception of health and disease as, emanating from a fall in your awareness, from a fall in your consciousness, is at the basis of Ayurvedic thought process. And it is here that Ayurveda is linking with the Vedas, because the Vedic way of life is a way of, elevated state of consciousness, a state of prajna. And when you fall from that prajna, you will get disease. And Atharva Veda is the Veda of Prayashchitta. That is, when there is a fall, when there is prajnaparadha, how can you, so natharvati iti atharva, means that which forcefully brings back that harmony of your three Shaktis, that is Atharva Veda. And so, now when you say Atharva Veda is a Prayashchitta Veda, and when you say that the purpose of Ayurveda is to restore prajna, then it does make a lot of sense to think about Ayurveda as an Upanga of Atharva Veda. So it is in this sense that Ayurveda links with the Vedas. And when you say Ayurveda is a part of Rig Veda, so Ayurveda has two divisions, Swasthasya, Swasthya Rakshanam, and Adurasya, Vikara Prashamanam. And one of the synonyms of Chikitsa is Prayashchittam. Prayashchittam is one of the synonyms of treatment, which is coming from that Atharva Veda philosophy, that treatment means to restore prajna. What is the biggest Prayashchittam? Is to just recover your prajna. It is not the concept of sin or punishment, or it is just there is a fall in your awareness and you have to restore that awareness. And when you say Ayurveda is part of Rig Veda, it is for Swastha Vritta. That is, Ashtanga Hridaya, the celebrated textbook of Ayurveda, begins with a very famous verse, Ragadi Rogan, Sadadanu Shaktan, Asheshagaya Prasradan Asheshan, Autsukya Moha Radidan Jakhana, Yopurva Vaidyaya, Namostu Tasme. Which means that when when the Raga Adi Riyasham, if you have Raga is Rajatmagam. It is Rajas. So once that Rajas is considered as one of the faults of the human mind, Rajas tamascha manaso dvaucha dosha udahrito. So when you are under the sway of Rajoguna, then the seed of Raga can bring all the other, Raga Adiriyasham. Raga is only the beginning. So when you have that emotional stability or maturity, which is what is represented by Rig Veda, Richa Stutau, it is a purity of your emotions, then you cannot be sick, you maintain health. So when you look at these interpretations, the connection of Ayurveda with Rig Veda and specifically Atharva Veda becomes interesting. And only in one textbook, in the Kashyapa Samhita, there is a very specific reference to how Ayurveda evolved from the Vedas. And I think this gives a very important clue to answer some of the questions posed by the Western scholars as why Ayurveda is very different from Vedas. So Atharva Veda Upanishads Pragutpannaha. Where exactly did Ayurveda originate? It is from the Upanishads of Atharva Veda. So just like the Upanishads and Vedanta evolved out of Veda, and you can see there is also a stark difference from the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda of the Vedas. So just like the Upanishads emerged, Ayurveda also emerged as a knowledge system from the Upanishads of Atharva Veda. So this is the traditional take on how Ayurveda is related to the Vedas and how it becomes an Upanga of the Vedas. Now if you look at Ayurveda and Darshanas, Ayurveda is predominantly based on Nyaya, Vaisheshika and Sankhya. The Sankhya classification of the ontological entities is taken almost as it is in the Ayurvedic texts. And Ayurveda also, so Ayurveda being a very pragmatic science, you really see a mosaic of approaches. In different contexts, different darshanas are accepted. So, because in Ayurveda we have Naishtiki Chikitsa and Laukiki Chikitsa. So we are dealing with a multi-layered reality. Ayurveda says that for whom is the Shastra explained? It is for the Karma Purusha. So the word patient is a later entry into the Ayurvedic thought process. So today we are talking about person-centered medicine. But Ayurveda was perhaps the first system in the world to bring this idea, because Purusha and person are also related, they are cognate terms. So Ayurveda says that this knowledge system is not created for a patient, because the moment you think of somebody as a patient, so that those are again fall in approaches, that you have the person-centered approach, the patient-centered approach, then the disease-centered approach. So once you come to a disease-centered approach, you are completely dehumanized, depersonalized, which is the status of modern medicine. Ayurveda can also be partially accused of following a patient-centered approach. The word rogi is there. But over and above the rogi, the Ayurvedic physician is looking at Karma Purusha. Karma Purusha means a person struggling with his own karma, struggling to emancipate himself. And so he has to also follow step by step. Different darshanas make meaning to that Karma Purusha in different contexts of his evolution. So Ayurveda offers a kaleidoscopic view of the universe. You can find a lot of contradictions. Simply speaking, Ayurveda says that this Shastra should be Trividha Shishya Buddhi Hitam. That we are not addressing one kind of intelligence. We are addressing different kind of intelligence. The Adhikari for Ayurveda is much vast. If you look at some other traditions of knowledge, we have very specific Adhikaris. Who have kind of fine-tuned their mind and become Adhikari for a particular subject. Of course, as a Vaidya, you have a very specific Adhikara, but Ayurveda is not just for the Vaidya. So, in Ashtangrada it is told who should study Ayurveda. Ayukkamayamana Ayurvedobodesheshu Paramadaro Vidheya. Anybody who is an Ayukkamayamana, he can study Ayurveda. So, the person who comes into Ayurveda is coming at different levels of intelligence. So the Shastra itself is created in such a way that it addresses 3 levels of intelligence. So what is true for one level is not true at another level. So you have contradictory statements in Ayurveda. In one side, Acharya says, idamagama siddhatvad pratyakshabhala darshanat mantravat samprayuktavyam namimamsyam kadachana. In another context, Dishanaya Sheshamapi Swayamuheda Buddhiman Na Shastra Matra Charano Nacha Analojidagama. So these are completely opposite kind of statements. And if you look at Charaka Samhita, this controversy is explained. Etavadhyalam Alpa Buddhinam Vyavaharaya. Buddhimadam tu Swanumana Yukti Kushalanam Anuktartha Grahanaya. So, this way of addressing different levels of intelligence, different, way of looking at the universe. So Ayurveda says broadly 3 lifestyles, 3 mindsets are described. In Charaka Samhita, in the context of diet, it is mentioned that laukikam karma yad vrittau, vaidikam swargadau chayat, karmapavarge yachoktam tachapi anne pradishtitam. I mean, people generally who come to study Ayurveda are of 3 types. One is laukika. And Ayurveda defines laukika. Who's a laukika? Who cannot distinguish between what is priyam and hitam. So a Vaidika doesn't mean in Ayurveda somebody who does the homas or chants the Vedas. Because Vaidika means who has a deeper perception. So Veda and Loka, this is always in the discourse. Loke, Vedecha. So even in the Bhagavad Gita we have this distinction. Atosmi Loke, Vedecha Prathita Purushottama. So in Ayurveda also, this distinction is made. So Laukika means the perception of the Loka, and the definition is not materialism, or it is again a psychological. Laukika cannot distinguish between Priyam and Hitam. And Hitamevanurudhyande prapariksha parikshakaha. Priyameva tu Laukikaha. So Vaidika is able to distinguish. And Karmapavargi goes beyond these 2 things. He is neither affected by Priyam or Hitam because he has renounced karma. So what Ayurveda says is the advice for a Laukika is different from an advice for a Vaidika. So we cannot have a same prescription. So it is not just individual based, it is based on so many classifications. So this makes it very challenging for Ayurveda to give, even a guideline on what is good for you and what is bad. So text, again and again the text will say hita hidatve peganda niyamo asmada nischita. There is no ekanta niyama for what is hitam and what is ahitam. It is according to desha, according to kala, according to the individual. So this is how Ayurveda looks at the darshanas. I mean, as multiple windows through which we can have insights of the external world and use it for the evolution of the Purusha. When you look at how Ayurveda understands the world, I mean, we have a very simplified mapping of the universe. The texts in the Charaka Samhita explicitly is discussed that Aindriyagam Vyaktam, Atindriyam Avyaktam, and in between is Vyakta Vyaktam. So in one sweeping classification, Ayurveda tries to link up so many things together. So for Aindriyagam Pratyaksham, for Vyakta Vyaktam, it is Anumana, and for Avyaktam, it is Aptopadesha. And treatments also. So everything becomes 3-dimensional. Now 3-dimensional world is also very flexible. You can even stretch it to 5 dimensions. You can stretch it. But Ayurveda generally uses a 3-dimensional model to link all these concepts, weave them together. So we have these 3-dimensional reality. So there is a 3-dimensional Purusha, Sattvam Atma Shariram Cha Trayameda Tridandavat. So we are existing in 3 worlds at the same time. This is the idea that Ayurveda conveys. I mean, what you see here, the Shariram, is only the tip of the iceberg. Your personality extends. Your personality has Vyakta, Vyakta, Vyakta and Avyakta. So trying to reach into the Avyakta was the epistemological and ontological approach of Ayurveda. So Adhyatmika, Adhibhaudika, Adhidaivika. So Yukti Vipasraya, Deva Vipasraya, Sattva Vajya. It all stems from this perception and understanding of reality as a 3-dimensional entity. So this is a fundamental thing that, this is a difference in modern science. Pratyaksham is given ultimate importance, that even laboratory experiments are only extended perception. So Ayurveda is very clear on this. Extended perception is still perception. It is alpam. Analpam hi apratyaksham. So that is the whole focus was on how to reach into the apratyaksham and not get entangled with what is pratyaksham. You can magnify pratyaksham n number of times, but you get stuck in that vicious circle. You're not able to. So magnifying, seeing a bacteria, or Ayurveda was. I have written a paper on this, that Ayurveda was perhaps the first medical system in the world to propose the existence of microbes. And Chakrapani clearly defines it, that which mamsa chakshusha na pratyaksham, cannot be seen with your physical eyes. And kejit saukshmyad adarshanaha, about these krimis very clearly described. Vrittaha, apadaha, tamraha. So they are circular, without any feet, and they are moving in the body fluids, and they are not visible. So they were aware of a microscopic world, but they realized that that is still the shadow. So the whole idea was pratyaksham is a shadow. There is something else which creates that shadow, and that is beyond the ken of perception. But on the other hand, Ayurveda also gives, there's a very nice balance created here. So only the limits of pratyaksha is emphasized. Pratyaksha is not nullified in that process. There is no extreme viewpoint in Ayurveda. And Vagbhara finally says sarva dharmeshu madhyamam. So that is always the approach in Ayurveda. Synthesizing rather than taking extreme positions. So direct perception cannot be nullified. So here I was very much reminded of Shankara's, Sovishaya Shurani Pramanani. Nacha Pratyaksha Virodhe Shrude Pramanyam. This is a very similar approach in Ayurveda. Where Pratyaksha is valid, only Pratyaksha is valid. Like Shankara again says, I am tempted to quote Shankara instead of Ayurveda, because he has put it much more explicitly. When he says, Nahi Shruti Shatamapi, Shitognir Apragasa iti Bruvad Pramanyam Labhade. So similarly in Ayurveda, what is Pratyaksha Drishtam? That is Pratyaksha. It is valid there, but you have to go beyond it. So that is where Anumana and Aptobadesha comes, and we go to the extent of saying that the only way to go beyond this pratyaksha is alaukika pratyaksha. So even Anumana cannot go beyond a certain range, because Anumana in Ayurveda is also pratyaksha purvam. It is pratyaksha purvam. There is something which is pratyaksha and something which is apratyaksha. You again have the limitation that what is apratyaksha is dependent on what is pratyaksha. So if there is no pratyaksha, you cannot do anumana. So in the realm of aptobadesha, you go even beyond pratyaksha and anumana. And so in Charaka Samhita, this is distinguished as jnana and pariksha. Tatra tavad aptobadesha jnanam. Jnanavadam dvidha pariksha pratyaksham anumanam chedi. So you get the map from Aptobadesha, and then you do your own investigation through your own Pratyaksha and Anumana. You have to verify it. So there is a debate whether there are 3 Pramanas or 2 Pramanas. So for the totally ignorant, there are 3 Pramanas. Those who have studied Aptobadesha, there are only 2 Pramanas. So which means Aptobadesha is also not a final Pramana. Aptobadesha prepares you for Pariksha. And Charaka very clearly says, Pariksha karino hi kushala bhavanti. If you just study the Aptobadesha, you cannot become a good clinician. You have to do Pariksha. And Pariksha means verifying Aptobadesha through Pratyaksha and Anumana. So this is very clearly kind of explained. So in Ayurveda, therefore, we developed what is called as a 3-tier knowledge system. This is called as Tattva, Shastra and Vyavahara. So every Vyavahara, because Ayurveda is a practical science. When you have a problem, you have to give a solution. We cannot debate. We cannot have dialogues when a patient is suffering. All those dialogues are relevant only to the point of deciding what action to take. But you don't have too much time to have dialogues. So Ayurveda also had to kind of cut short all these big debates, because finally, so it says Vaidya Samoho Nisamshya Garanam. That was how we looked at dialogue. Nisamshaya means in karma. So you cannot end with a samshaya in a debate. So the whole purpose of debate was to decide what should be done. Kim karyam, kima karyam. So 3 levels discovery of knowledge is Loka and Veda. Loka means superficial understanding, Veda means a deeper understanding of reality. And then we have invention. When you apply this knowledge, it becomes Shastra. So Shastra is not truth. It is only the map of truth. It is only map of reality. Shastra is considered as Tarjani Darshanam. Like you show the moon with your finger, but that finger is not the truth. The moon is the truth. So this distinction is there in Ayurveda. Tattva and Shastra are different. And Vyavahara is the practice. So in Ayurveda they are very gross translations, principle, theory and practice. So Shastra is only a pointer. Shastra is different from Tattva, which is the experience behind the Shastra. So the goal of teaching was Tattvadhigata Shastrartho. That through the process of education itself, the student has to reach the Tattva. Only then Agama Siddhatum happens. If you just teach somebody some Vyavaharas, you are not preserving Agama. If the Agama has to be preserved, you need to create a student who has re-verified everything up to the point. So, Tattvadhigama Shastrartho, Drishta Karma, Swayam Kriti. He has to become an innovator. He has to be able to do things, new things. He has to become a Shastrakara. Only then the education becomes complete. So it was very well defined that just doing some Vyavahara is not the criteria of completion of Shishyodhyapyo Gado Yavad Andam Tantrartha Karmanam. So Tattva was unchanging. So Ayurveda has a very flexible system where it says that at the core, the principles, it's Soyam Ayurveda Shashvado Nirdishyate. Because Bhava Swabhava Nityatvad. Anyatra Avabodha Upadeshabhyam. So the teachings are not Shashvata. The principles are Shashvata. The Shastra can change. Sushruta's Shastra is different from Charaga's Shastra. The whole explanations, Sushruta's Virya classification is different. Sushruta's classification of pathogenesis is different from Charaga. So the Shastras are different. The Tattva is the same. And Vyavahara can be completely changing. So, what I have understood, and which also many critical thinkers have pointed out, is that the future of Ayurveda is in the rediscovery of this thought process. If Ayurveda is to evolve and develop as an independent knowledge system into the future, this is the roots from where we have to start. Just by bringing in modern methods of research, we cannot ignite this creative thought process in Ayurveda. So we have a framework. To summarize how Ayurveda looks at the knowledge building process, knowledge creation. I put it in English. It's Aptopadesha, Pratyaksha and Anumana. And then we also have enumeration, definition and investigation. Uddesham, Lakshanam, Uddesha, Lakshana and Pariksha, which is also part of the Ayurvedic thought process. And then everything that Ayurveda discusses has to be understood in terms of Dravya Guna Karma. In fact, the classical Ayurvedic texts say that the purpose of Ayurveda is to elaborate Ayushya, Anayushya, Dravya Guna Karmas. So everything in the world is understood in terms of whether they are Ayushya or Anayushya. So if you say the doshas, what are they? We have to be able to explain. It cannot be anything else. Is it a satta padartha or is it not? In fact, there are debates which also say that doshas are not having true reality. They are just like, the latitude and longitudes. They are imaginary constructs which help us to map the Vimshati gunas of the body and understand, So doshas represent a way. It is a scheme to understand how the gunas in the body are balancing each other. Dhatus are dravyas. So whatever we discuss in Ayurveda, we have to be able to explain what are we dealing with. Is it dravya guna karma or are we dealing with samanya and vishesha? The samanya vishesha siddhanta has been evolved specifically in the context of medicine. Sarvada sarvabhavanam samanyam vriddhigaranam hrasahedur visheshascha pravrittirubhayasya tu. And samanyam egattugaram
Visheshastu Prithakta Krit. So there are definitions in Ayurveda through which we use the Samanya Vishesha Siddhanta in making a formulation, in executing a treatment. Everywhere, the Samanya Vishesha of Dravyaguna Karmas constitute the basis. So we have to understand so it is a very complex computational process. I will come into that. We can call this in today's language as molecular combinatorics. Creating molecular cocktails by rearranging the constituents of nature. And that rearrangement is based on Samanya Vishesha Siddhanta. So the human being is both tangible and intangible at the same time. I also hinted upon this point already. So this is a very interesting aspect of this is completely lost in today's educational system, that there is a context in Ayurveda called Ayurveda Avataranam. Brahma Smartva Ayusho Vedam Prajapati Majigrahad Sushvinautau Sahasraksha. So Ayurveda emerged. There is a suprahuman realm of Ayurveda, and it's usually dismissed as a Purana story. But if you look deeper into it, the whole idea in Ayurveda is that to learn Ayurveda, you must elevate your consciousness. Because pratyaksham alpam, analpam hya pratyaksha, you have to go beyond anumana, and that is possible only when you elevate your awareness. So that is what is called as Ayurveda Avataranam. If the awareness of Ayurveda should come into the human mind, we must elevate ourselves. And that elevation, Brahma means infinite expansion. So in the infinite expansiveness of your awareness, you cognize, the knowledge of Ayurveda. So these are in nature. The contact point is Indra. Indra is Manas actually, because it's the Athipa of both Karmendriya and Jnanendriya. And in Ayurveda, Indra has to be a Sahasraksha. Sahasraksha means he must have 1,000 eyes. So when your perception is enhanced, today just like we are using an electron microscope 1000x, but what Ayurveda says, electron microscope won't give you the knowledge of Ayurveda because it's still pratyaksha. You need to expand your mind. So many techniques in Ayurveda, which is why it is lost today, I think, like Nadi. They cannot be studied without an expansion of your awareness. Because today we know Nadi is very related to what is today understood as heart rate variability. We thought that the heartbeat is the same. Two heartbeats are not the same. So today, because modern science is based on averages, the average value is the standard. But Ayurveda is non-linear. It is looking at variability. Vailakshanyad shariranam asthayitwada tadhaivacha doshathadu maladinam parinamanna vidyade. Ayurveda does not believe in the law of averages. We cannot say, now modern science is telling that, suppose your BP is, if you take in the morning, afternoon, evening, night, it will be different. It cannot be the same. Your blood sugar will be different. Now, we can average it and say this is the normal, and so if your value at any given time is between those values, you are normal. Ayurveda says no. How much it is varying across day and night, that variability is a more important index. Like for example, if your heart rate variability is too high, then it means greater adaptability. If your heart rate variability is very less, you may be still within normal range, but it means loss of adaptability. So Ayurveda is looking at variability as a factor in understanding, so you need, when you use your fingers, you're actually analyzing one pulse wave. One pulse wave comes on your fingers. So you are seeing the rising wave, the peak, and then the drop. Now this creates a pattern in your mind. Just like these signals can create a graph, is it not? Now you have to do a nadi in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. When your mind is in a basal condition, patient is also in a basal. This is like eliminating noise. You have to adjust the noise to signal ratio in such a way that you get only the true signals. So that is why nadi was always checked in the morning. Now you need that much clarity of your mind to be able to, so a physician will touch his fingers, keep it for that much time till the pattern emerges in his mind. Those patterns were sometimes compared to the jumping of a frog, the moving of a snake, and things like that. But so many of these subtle techniques of diagnosis also required mental training. So in the learning of Ayurveda itself, students were encouraged to engage in several mental exercises which will enhance which is completely not present today. Today when you go into a laboratory experiment, you need to only calibrate the instrument. You don't need to calibrate your mind. But in Ayurveda, we needed to calibrate our mind and not just the instrument. So we have, with this perspective, Ayurveda has tried to build a model of how the human being functions, and I want to tell this is very multi-dimensional, multi-paradigmatic. This is the, beauty and complexity of Ayurveda. Ayurveda, the basic premise is that a human being is very complex. So one map or one representation will not capture the complexity. So you need a multi-dimensional, multi-paradigmatic. And this is quite shocking because when you study modern science, you are fixed in one paradigm. You don't have to shift paradigms. It's much more easy to study when you are in such a framework. But when you study Ayurveda, you're jumping from one paradigm to the other. For example, we have the Swabhava Uparama Vada, which in the Charaka Samhita is a very fundamental principle. That the question, a student asks the question, how does the human body get cured by a disease? So Agnivesha is telling, now we know that whatever is created gets automatically destroyed. That is the reality. So what does treatment do? Because whatever medicine you are giving, it also gets destroyed. Nimesha kalat bhavanam kala shighradharotte. And there is no punarbhava of that which has already got destroyed. So if a disease is born, how does it sustain itself? If you are giving a treatment, how does it? So today, for these questions, we are giving answer through molecular biology. We will talk about molecules. We will say that these molecules combine, these receptors, that is how pathology and physiology happens, and the medicine. But here in Charaka Samhita, you have perhaps the first modeling of how medicine works, and this is comparable to quantum mechanics rather than molecular biology. Because what Charaka tells is, everything in the body is actually destroyed the moment it is created. Pravritti hetur bhavanam na nirodhesti karanam. There is a cause only for the creation. There is no cause for destruction. So the problem is not, you are not going to destroy something. You are only changing the cause. So you are not destroying disease. This is a very interesting insight. It is going to die. The disease will die. The problem is that it is being perpetuated. The same cause is operating. That is why that is called a Santana Parampara. So what is surviving is the Santana Parampara of a disease. Disease is already, so it's you don't even have to take any effort to destroy everything. Universe itself is a big destruction. Everything is going, so Siryate anena idi sariram. So the most important, so Vrano Gatra Vichurnane, the definition of wound is Gatra Vichurnana, means that which completely destroys the body. So the thing is, so he explains, he makes a very nice model of, how one thing is destroyed, created, destroyed, created, destroyed. When the next moment it's again created, that santanam makes it appear to you as if that substance is there. So what you are seeing is only a sequence of events. It is accepted in Ayurveda. But the only thing is, immediately after that, the Niratmavada of Buddhism is Khandana, refuted. Chanabangura Vada does not mean that everything comes out of emptiness. So that is very clear. Charaka does a Khandana of the Chanabangura Vada. So he established that Atma is ultimately the basis of this. But in treatment, this gives a very practical way of explaining. So Yabhir Kriyabhir Dhadunam Samyam Jayade. That is Chikitsa. Yabhir kriyabhir jayande sharire dhatava samaha. That vishamatvam, that parambara of vishama dhatu is shifted to a parambara of samadhatu. And that is the explanation in Ayurveda. So this is explained so now this, where we are talking about a reality where substances are disappearing even before they are created. It is not cellular level, it is not molecular level, it is subatomic level. I mean, only there this reality happens. Because otherwise, at cellular level, things are happening very slowly. There is not this kind of construction and destruction. And the word dhatu in Ayurveda also comes from dharana, which means this santana parambara is to be, so it's not a tissue, you cannot correlate it to, they are very functional kind of principles. The problem with the Ayurvedic translation has been that we have found modern equivalents for all these terms. Dhatu becomes tissues, doshas become... Yeah, because if you really go into the deeper meaning of these concepts, you get a different picture altogether. It's a different way of modeling your human body. So existence is nothing but cycles of creation and destruction. And how do we negotiate? That is the method of chikitsa. Okay, so this I already... So it is explained, now you have to understand this. Hetu, Utpatti, Vriddhi, Upaplava and Viyoga. This is inevitable. There is a Hetu for creation and then there is an Utpatti. Something is born when there is a balance between creation and destruction. When creation and destruction equals, there is Utpatti. When creation faster than destruction, there is Vriddhi. And when again creation becomes less than destruction, there is Uvaplava. When it becomes inviable, then there is destruction. So this is a cycle of, so within each cycle, these stages, so what Ayurveda says, you can negotiate only to a certain stage. So all Ayurvedic texts talk about Dirgham Jividiyam, not Amrdatvam. Although it is said that Ayurvedo Amritanam, it was very clear that only Dirgha Jivida is possible. So the natural state was called as Prakriti, abnormal state is Vikara, and the state of destruction is Vikriti. So the entire discourse of anatomy, physiology, which is called as Shariram. So in Ayurveda there is no anatomy and physiology. It is I have been opposing this right from the beginning because this definition of Ayurvedic Shariram is Ityatra Janma Maranam Yata Samyak Udahridam Sharirasya Tadasthanam Shariramita Muchyate. And Sharira Sthanam begins with Srishti Shariram, then Garbha Shariram, then Dosha Shariram, then Prakriti Shariram, then Marma Shariram, then Vikriti Shariram. So anatomy and physiology are always together. And we say in Ayurveda, you should not start the study of medicine by dissecting a dead body. Because it insensitizes you. You are seeing the emergence of the Purusha. So you have to study medicine by seeing the birth of life. Ayurveda physician is a pranabhisara. He is a friend of prana. And you are seeing a body with no prana. You are seeing a dead body and you are dissecting it. You become, and at that age of 17 years, and that's not the way it should be learnt. So in Ayurveda, Sharirasthana begins with Srishti Shariram, Garbha Shariram, and then you want to prevent death. This is a big, difference in the approach. And then in Ayurveda, I'm cutting short many things, but finally, what Ayurveda says is that everything is multifactorial. We are talking about relationships and not about entities. So individual entities just disappear. There are only relationships. So the language of Ayurveda is a language of relationships. If you look at dosha, and if you try to find out where is the dosha, you will not find anything. Because doshas are nothing but a network of relationships. You can see it, it is ubiquitous. But still, te vyapinopi hirnabhyor adhomadhyordo samshraya. It's everywhere. Because they are talking about how things are related to each other. And the relationships are more important than the entities themselves. That is physiology. How things are related to each other makes them function correctly. So Ayurveda is a science of correcting relationships. It's not working on the entities. So this is a very, very big difference. So here we are facing lot of problems in translation today. Because many Ayurvedic terms are inadvertently equalized with modern understanding of physiology, which is very, very gross and entirely different. So many causes are. So this is how Ayurveda extended beyond Anumana. In Charaka there is another pramana which is called Yukti. Yukti means for every event that happens, there is an interplay of Upakarakara and Upaghadakara bhavas. So if you don't take care of all these Upakarakara and Upaghadakara bhavas, you cannot influence the outcome of that event. So Yukti means to perceive. Buddhi pashyati ya bhavan bahu karana yogajan yuktis trikala satnyeya trivarga sadhyade. It is not going to help you for moksha. They are very clear about it. It is a manipulative, practical thing. So trikala, trivarga sadhyade. Only you will get only trivarga through this. You will not get moksha. For moksha you need higher perceptions. This is manipulating with the phenomenon, and Ayurveda is based on yukti. Ayurveda is an algorithm. Tishtatyupari yuktitnyo dravyajnanavadam sada. This is again the science of relationships. If you know many dravyas, so Charaka says, Oshadhir nama rupabhyam janadehi ajapavane avipascheva gopascha ye janye vanacharina. They also know that. Even if you do not know the rupa jnana or guna jnana, arupajna api yuktitnyaha tattvajnojnayaha. If he knows the yukti, then even if he doesn't know the nama rupa guna, then he is a tattvajna, he is a vaidya. So, matra kalasraya yukti siddhir yuktau pradishtida. All siddhi is on yukti. That is why Ayurvedic medicine is called as a yoga. Yoga means combination. Yoga means creating the right relationships. That is the algorithm. What should be done first? So, upagada, yukti. So, this much I mentioned. So this is again, so Ayurveda again creates a very rational framework saying this Hetulinga Aushadha Skandham Swasthadura Parayanam. So for every event there is a Hetu that's based on the Swabhava Rupamada. The Linga will give you the clue to what is the Hetu. According to the Hetu, if you do the Aushadha, then you can reverse it. Because you can work on, not on the destruction but on the creation. So Ayurvedic treatment is not destroying the disease, but it is creating health. So very interestingly, there are many other elements that we find in Charaka Samhita. Charaka suddenly says, Vina tarkena ya siddhi yadricha siddhi revasa. Is it okay to cure, treat a patient? He gets okay. He says, it's not enough. You may not even have done anything. You cannot claim that you have cured unless you can do a tarka and establish that so and so reason the patient got better. So this is the first attempt historically to distinguish between what is called as chance effect and real effect. So Charaka, I think, was the first statistician to talk about yadricha siddhi. So and Chakrapani in fact coins another term. He is a commentator of Charaka Samhita. He uses the term Prati Niyamiki Siddhi as opposed to Yadricha Siddhi. And he says Yadricha Siddhi is like Gunakshara Nyaya, where a worm will take the shape of a letter but it does not know what it is. So, na tatra vaidyaha roga pramokshe karanam. So this kind of a self-criticism, I think, is quite unprecedented. Yes? A good doctor. And Ayurveda was also one of the earliest systems to talk about placebo effect, but not as a placebo. Because today we use the placebo to just measure whether there was a real effect or a... Ayurveda says placebo is the best medicine. That manasaha arthanukulyadi tushtirurja balodaya sukhopa bhogadajasyad vyadheschado balachaya. If you can influence the mind of the person, tushtir, urja, balodaya, Vyadhi Balachaya will automatically happen. That is why Vaidyas are surviving. So, even if you are a quack, successful practice is possible. It's very important to understand. Charaka tells, Tasmanna Bhishaj, you go to any physician because you need a psychological support. Atanka Panka Magnanam Hastalambo Bhishakjidam. Somebody is trying to get up, somebody try to help is fine, you get a psychological support. But when you should not go to a doctor, that is also mentioned. Tasmanna bhishaja yuktam yukti bahyena bheshajam dhimada kinjidadeyam jividarogya kankshina. See, it is okay as long as the physician does not do anything wrong. Psychological counseling. The moment he starts giving medicine, don't take it. Because there you have to check whether it is according to yukti. If it is not according to yukti, it will be harmful for. So these are very interesting kind of, open approaches, very pragmatic approaches that we see. And in Ayurveda there is also distinction. Today we are talking about efficacy and safety. Ayurveda has a much deeper definition. Chikitsa should be siddha and shuddha. Prayoga shamayad vyadhim yonyam anyam udirayed naso vishuddha shuddhastu shamayad yanna kopayed. That treatment, and it is a prayoga. Ayurveda said no medicine is free from side effects. Nacha kinchid adosha nirgunam guna bhuyastvam ato vichintyadam. So there is a big debate, Phalamatriya Siddhi in Saraka Samhita, where every acharya is coming and establishing this Madana Bhala is Sreshta. Then somebody else will say, no, it has got all those faults. Finally, Atraya is coming and convening and saying, all what you said is true and also wrong at the same time. Because nacha kinchid adosha nirgunam. So only through prayoga safety is possible. How you use it makes something safe. No substance, even food is poison sometimes. So it's a very nice take on, so yogadavi vishantikshna muttadamam bheshajam bhavet. So, and it's a very interesting thing in Ayurveda that avijñādam aushadham. Aushadham hi anabhijñādam. Don't use a medicine which you do not know. And to know a medicine, there is a big criteria in Ayurveda. But this is not followed today. So that is the sad fate of. So what we can say is that the success of Ayurveda at the level of pramana is the extension of Anumana into Yukti. Anumana is looking at only two variables. That is, how much time? 10 minutes. Anumana is just looking at, linear relationships. One sadhya and one sadhana. But yukti is multiple. So in Ayurveda, anumanam khalu tarko yukti apeksha. Yukti means the correlation between the sadhana and the sadhya. And here we see in Ayurveda the dependent and independent variables are differentiated as sadhya and sadhana. And we talk about sahacharya, vyapti and paramarsha or causation. Causation in Ayurveda, karananu vidhayitvad karyanam tat swabhavata. Just because two things are associated does not mean one is the cause of the other. That is only sahacharya. Yeah, that is association. When the association becomes strong, when there is a vyapti, it is called as correlation. When the vyapti is further studied and you establish cause and effect relationship, then it becomes a paramarsha, or then causation is possible. So all Ayurveda Siddhantas have been verified to confirm causation. That is what the texts are saying. But we do not know how they did this. In Anumana, which in Tarka Sangha is not mentioned directly in Ayurveda, but there are hints that this was used by the tradition of Ayurveda, the Pakshas. So Paksha is Sandigdha Sadhyavan Paksha, Nischida Sadhyavan Sapaksha, and Nischida Sadhya Bhavavan Vipaksha. This is very similar of a context of paramarsha or causation used in modern clinical trials, where we have the trial drug and a positive control and a negative control. You have to show that it is not present in the negative and it is present in the positive. So this is how causation is established, and that thought process is there. But where is and we see also avinabhava sambandha and avyabhijaritva. This is today understood as specificity and sensitivity. Specificity means if A and B are associated together, like for example inflammation and a particular disease, rheumatoid arthritis. Now inflammation has the fault of vyabhijaritva. Means it is seen not only in rheumatoid arthritis, it can be seen in many other conditions. So ESR is a vyabhijari hedu. Now avinabhava sambandha means if a hetu is seen sometimes, but sometimes it is not seen. So you will get the false positives and the false negatives. So this Anvaya Vyapti and Vyatireka Vyapti plus eliminating this is part of the thought process in Ayurveda to establish causation. Because this was very important for success of treatment. Sarvam hetumat bhavam hetor abhavat nanu vartade. This is a fundamental principle. So unless hetu is established correctly, treatment will not succeed. So mere sahajarya is not enough. Your treatment cannot be sure. So the siddhatama treatments, tesham siddhataman yogan. So in many places Charaga will tell, or our Acharya said, I am selected the siddhatama amongst. So then there is ayuta siddhato. One is absent, the other should also be absent. So we can say that, Ayurveda talks about relationships, and these relationships were developed into a concept of combinatorics. This is where Ayurveda and modern medicine differs. Ayurvedic treatment is always multi-modal. Ayurvedic medicines are combinatorics. Modern methods of analysis, they are all methods of separation. So they go in completely opposite direction. So some final thoughts. In Ayurveda, what we are testing, therefore, coming to the gross clinical level, Ayurveda developed this yukti, which we can tell is an algorithm, and it consists of well-defined iterations, recursions, and reflections. That is the framework. Iteration means you have to use a treatment and perhaps repeat it till the effect is obtained. You cannot initially define how many iterations are needed to produce an effect. So there is a certain flexibility. In modern medicine, it's a very strict guideline. So much medicine, the iterative element is not so dominant as in Ayurveda. Because in Ayurveda, when you say you have to do Amapachana, and if you ask how many days I have to give, it could be as minimum as 3 days to maximum as 14 days. So if you give 5 patients Amapachana treatment, there may be big variability. So clinical trial is not possible because you cannot give the same treatment. Then there is recursive means you have to do one treatment first for the second treatment to work. The second treatment has to be completed for the third treatment to work. So it is in a sequence and consequence. Some treatments have to be done together, some to be done one after the other. So this is how the algorithm is kind of defined. And then it has to be also reflexive. Means sometimes you have to completely change your approach based on what response you get from the patient. So what they were interested in producing results, they were not interested in creating rigid, systems. Very dynamic and very flexible. Now there are other interesting aspects. I've tried to put many things together, because of the short time. Just wanted to show the expansiveness of this whole thought process. In Ayurveda, there is also the distinction between Samantra and Nirmantra Chikitsa. So Samantra says, Ka Vaktra Bhed, Nirmantre Ka Vaktra Bhedoktri Shakti. In Nirmantra Chikitsa, it doesn't matter, Etad Brahma Bhashadam Brahmajova. Let Brahma say or his son say it. It doesn't matter. Haridaki is going to cause virajana. But a Samantra treatment depends on who does it. So here is the placebo plus true drug effect. So this kind of a clear distinction is very unique to the Ayurvedic tradition. In modern medicine, it came only very recently. Now questioning. This is a fundamental feature of the classical Samhitas. At the end of, after everything has been learned, Agnivesha is telling, Ityatrayad agamaya artha suktam tat suktinam peshalanam atriptaha bhedadinam sammado bhakti nammarha paprachedanim samsayano Agnivesha. And Agnivesha is telling, Drishyande Bhagavan Kejit Atmavando Roginaha Dravyopasthadra Sambanna Vruddha Vaidya Madhanuga. I cannot believe what you said. This is a very blunt statement. You have told me everything, but I cannot trust you. Because I am seeing people are following all your advice, they are still sick. See what's there. There are people who don't do what you are saying and they are okay. So how can I believe that your treatment will work? Now this is a blunt, it's a kind of a sweeping question. That means nullifies the entire teachings. in one sweep. Agnivesha means one who can enter fire. And the acharyas are considered as equivalent to fire. What is it? Tapasa deepta huyamana ivagnaya. So you needed a certain personality also to be able to converse with these kind of teachers. But Agnivesha is Bhakti Namra. So in Ayurveda there was this interesting debate of how to ask a question. So Ayurveda keeps it very nice definition. It does not structure it too much. What it tells is apradushtena bhavena prasannena andaratmana. Maybe it is borrowed from some other tradition. Shishyena samyak prishtasya gurur buddhi prakashate. So that intention was the only thing. So in all the questions you can see that clarity of intention. Then you have the freedom to ask anything. So bhedadinam sammado bhakti namraha paprachedani. So it is a real question. So as long as you have a real question, the semantics and the structure is okay. Apradushtena bhavena was the real criteria. If you had that, then you had the freedom to ask whatever you wanted. That is very clearly seen in this. So in Ayurveda, in answer, the Acharya says, Chikitsa cha na tulya bhavitu marhati. No, treatment and no treatment are not equal. I'll tell you why. Because vinabi kriya swasthyam gachadam shodashamsaya. Not all diseases are dependent on treatment for cure. Ayurveda was the first system in the world to tell about self-limiting diseases. Diseases can get cured by themselves. So even those who don't take medicine sometimes get cured. Physicians can make mistake. There are asadhya vyadis. If you treat there, you will not get a result. So in Lancet some time ago it was described that about 80% of the diseases that we get don't need any treatment, but people still consult physicians. 80% of consultations, not actual, diseases. 15% will not get cured in spite of treatment. And only 5% will actually require active medication. So we relive this debate here when Atreya is replying by saying, for those treatments where only medicine will work, only medicine will work. So, they go to the end of that debate, and then now Agnivesha is clear why and how this happens. Now the 3 levels of intelligence and debates and discussion in Ayurveda, we have Tadvidya Sambhasha. Bhishaja Saha Sambhasheda. It is a way to continue your knowledge. So, Satada Adhyanam Vada means Satada Adhyan, it's continuous medical education. Satada Adhyanam Vada Paradandravaloganam Tadvidya Acharya Sevacha Buddhi Medhagarogana. So this is mentioned in the Samhitas itself. So even elaborate guidelines are there. There are structured vadas, unstructured, hostile, friendly. All these things are described elaborately. And so, how to question is also there. And the thing is, in Ayurveda, there is a lot of freedom of thinking. There are many schools of thought. There are even terminologies are Swatantra Samjna and Paratantra Samjnas are there. Which means people had the freedom to, Kashyamo Netyaha. And then, you have very open discussions, oppositions. And what is very interesting is that scientific writing was structured. Ayurveda is one of those shastras where Tantra Yuktis have been preserved. It's not available. You have in Artha Shastra and then in Vishnu, Dharmotara Purana. But in Ayurveda you have very interesting descriptions of Tantra Yuktis and its applications. And Ayurvedic texts are also extremely structured. We have Sangraha, Samhitas, and Prakarana Granthas, Nikhandus, Koshas, Sutras. And there's one point I wanted to mention here. Ayurvedic study, in modern science we call as, so just a few minutes and I'm concluding, it's the last thing. This concept of Akshepa and Samadhana is very central to the learning process. That when you learn the Shastra, you have the freedom to try to falsify it. Means you can give an Akshepa and then the Samadhana. So creating an Akshepa was almost mandatory. That if you cannot think of an Akshepa of a particular statement, then the same concept that you were discussing earlier, but maybe slightly presented in a different way, that you would look at all the Purva Pakshas, maybe even construct Purva Pakshas where it is not available, and then. So this is a kind of summary of the Ayurvedic way of mapping epistemology, ontology, and then bringing it to the level of actual practical interventions in a very coherent manner. So the conclusion is that Ayurveda has evolved as a knowledge system deriving its foundations from the Vedas and Darshanas, but then applying it very specifically in the context of health. And I would like to really propose that Ayurveda is actually trans-scientific. Means it includes science but goes beyond it. So we don't need an opposition with science. And so Ayurveda can serve as a template, as a kind of meta framework to bring together multiple views on medical thinking. And this is how we are looking at Ayurveda as the future of integrative medicine. Now bringing it down to the contemporary period. I think the real strength of Ayurveda and its contemporary relevance is this multi-paradigmatic, meta structuring on that framework. So because today alternate systems are evolving and the biggest challenge is how to have an integration. So this is how we are looking at Ayurveda into the future, and that's how the research work in our institute is proceeding. So thank you very much for your patient listening.
And these Ayurveda texts were periodically updated. For example, Dridhabala himself was trying to update Sushrasa Samhita. Yes. Yes. But this periodic updation was not properly documented somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, what we know is that three chronological layers are kind of clearly explained. That the Agnivesha's period, then Charaga's period, and Dridhabala. After that, there is no clear documentation of what has happened. But it is very clear because, in Vienna, there was a group of scholars who were trying to do a critical edition of the Charaka Samhita. They started just with the Vimanasthana. And they discovered for the first time about 132 manuscripts. And then they found that there are two recensions for the Samhita. Even the whole order of the chapters in Chikilsasthana are entirely different. So there's a Bengali recension and a Kashmiri recension. So the logic is all. So these things have not been actually, so definitely if you see the variations in the manuscripts, when you create that stemma and organize them chronologically, you do see a lot of evolution. And
it was a wonderful presentation. Actually, you are astonishing us with the flood of proper citations and quotations from Samhita Granthas. Now, I have got two mischievous questions. Right from the very beginning, you are depending upon etymological explanation from Ayurveda, eti ityayoh. This has been done by many people in ancient times also. Yaska, for example, and this Bhoja in Sahitya Shastra, he defines and he gives us peculiar meanings, giving etymologies for Sringara, etc., for terms, Sahitya Shastra terms. Like that, when you do like this, whether it will be acceptable for every aspect by everybody, whether it has got the justification of Shastra Pramana. So that's the first question. Second one, when you explain this passage, relying upon etymology, whether it is acceptable, universally acceptable. One question. Second one, while explaining the passage, Pratyaksham Alpam, Hyapratyaksham Analpam, you are saying that Ayurveda is not for ordinary people, only for evolved people whose mind has expanded. Mind expansion is essential. So for knowing Apratyaksha, evolution is essential. What ordinary people can do with Ayurveda? It is just like Bhamaha says about Bhatti's statement, Kavyanyapi yadimani vyakyagamyani hanta durmedhaso utsavas sudhyamalam hanta durmedhaso hataha. Bhatti in his Bhatti Kavya, so he says ordinary people, they cannot understand my work. Hanta Durmetha Sudhiyam Alam. Only learned people can understand and appreciate my work. Then Bhamaha says, if it is meant for only learned people, what ordinary people can do with that? Like that, when you say that Pratyaksham Alpam and Apratyaksam Analpam, and Ayurveda is for only evolved personalities, then what is the use of Ayurveda for ordinary common man?
So coming to the first question, I mean, Ayurveda textbooks have already explained the method of learning, in which etymology has one role. It's an important component, because it's in Charaka Samhita it is called Vakyasha, Vakyarthasha, Vakyartha Avayavasha, to study the Shastra. Patha, Avabodha and Anusthana. So the Patha is one element. After Patha comes the Avabodha, and then from the Avabodha comes the Anusthana. The ultimate criteria of deciding whether you have understood a passage correctly or not is at the time of Anusthana. If it gives the desired result, then you can be sure that your interpretation was correct. If it does not lead to the result, it is not. So etymology was one of the elements of Patha, that you to get the correct meaning of a word. So, but they left it open because it is all, in our tradition we say every time you read the Samhita you get newer shades of meaning, because the Sanskrit words have that ability to kind of compress a lot of hidden meanings. So it was a process of manana. So Patha was a process of manana, and in the process of manana etymology does play an important role. But that etymology, I agree that we have a tendency to maybe stretch it beyond context. So that defining is done in the context of Avabodha and Anusthana, because here it ultimately ends in a practice, in an actually an intervention in a real life situation. So the whole purpose of this analysis and understanding is to really produce results. So that is how the whole structuring was done. Now the second thing about the Ayurveda being only accessible to, that was never intended. What the texts were telling is, if you want to go to the level of Tattva of Ayurveda, which is not necessary to get benefits out of this knowledge. So Ayu Kamaya Manena Dharmartha Sukha Sadhanam Ayurveda Upadesheshu Paramaduro Videya. This is for everyone. So if you cannot understand the Tattva, you can still use that knowledge. If you want to experience the Tattva, if you want to create a new Shastra, if you want to become a Swayankriti, if you want to become a Shastragara, the whole tradition has been to reach out to people with lesser capabilities. When the Madhava Nidana was created, it is mentioned, Nana Tantra Vihinanam Bhishajam Alpamethasam Mandabuddhi Upagaraya. And Ashtanga Hridaya, when he says that Tasmad Analpa Bhalam Alpa Samudyamanam Prityartha Meda Dudidam Prathageva Tantram. So the whole scientific discourse in Ayurveda has been to reach out to the level, because it is a Prayoga Shastra. The whole goal is to make it useful to as many people as is possible. But if you want to structure, if you want to create new knowledge, then you need to elevate your consciousness to a certain level.
The distinction between the adept and the person who is interested but does not have the intellectual capacity to follow the subtle reasoning, that is certainly in astronomy and mathematics it is very common. The words like Mandabuddhi or Alpabuddhi, it's very, very common. I mean, Shankaracharya says at one point, I do not give the yukti of this result for the hitam of Mandabuddhi, for them to feel comfortable. So I think it is an epistemic position that Indian knowledge creators have taken for a very, very long time. It probably goes back to Charaka.
It was a very excellent presentation. I enjoyed the whole through your presentation. But I was wondering, what actually were you doing? I mean, is it that you are introducing Ayurveda to an uninitiated person, or is it a promotional kind of lecture? Exactly, no, I'm wondering. I'm not actually criticizing your position and all that. I'm wondering, I want to understand the whole thing, what is involved in this lecture.
Yes, I mean,
Again, one thing, that is one question. Other thing is not, I am raising not as a criticism or attack on you. It is like you mentioned the modern medicine, the dead body, and examining the dead body and trying to understand anatomy of the body. Are we not doing the same to Ayurveda? A knowledge system, finished knowledge system, and then examining it? Are you examining it or making somebody understanding it by practicing it? But a scholarship, you are introducing, working as a scholar, lecturing it as a scholar of Ayurveda, a system, and you are giving it to the others. So, in that sense, it's a finished dead system. You are mentioning or referring to a dead system, not an active system. No, this is not it's not a criticism, something, an image,
Yes.
And I am just...
yeah, it helps for me to also reflect on it.
this is not a criticism, I'm just wondering, even if I do this, I will wonder whether I am doing it rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for, bringing that, putting me in that position of, looking at what I did myself. Yes, I told right from the beginning that the warning that, my discourse and my discussion stem from the kind of existential situation that I am in, as a practitioner of Ayurveda, having to deal with, the kind of challenges posed to us by Western medicine, modern medicine, by regulatory authorities, a system which is very ancient, but at the same time, still living and struggling to reconstruct and re-express itself. So I think all these elements get reflected, I cannot escape that. So it is very much defined by my own existential, situation. Yes, that is why I'm saying it. That's true. So that's an ideal thing, but it all depends on how I came into this whole journey. I never wanted to study Ayurveda. It was a very unique situation. My father forced me to actually do this. There was a big struggle. It's a whole journey. So, the way I understood and absorbed Ayurveda will also reflect in the way I kind of express it. So this may strike some harmony in people who have had similar experiences. So it's not an extremely neutral Ayurveda-centered position. It's definitely influenced by so many other kind of contexts and situations. And I don't think I'm capable of also very quickly elevating to a level where I can talk just purely in terms of Ayurveda. Hopefully in future, this is a journey. And that's what I mentioned in the beginning, it all reflects my own challenges, discourses. And when I came here, I was not really aware of the audience. I did not really know what I will be really doing. I thought, we can just, get engaged in the discourse and find out. But of course, I was trying to project it to a group of people who were perhaps not so much engaged with Ayurveda. So it is in that perspective. Now the other thing of dead body dissection, you were asking whether my own exercise was not a dissection of a dead body. I did not really think about it in that way, frankly, because my impression was that I am dealing with a system that is still alive, and I'm interacting with it and using it in my day-to-day practice, and these reflections come out of that live interaction. I'm not looking at Ayurveda as a finished system, but as something which has even the potential to continue to evolve and continue to contribute. So it is in that framework that I'm actually looking at it. But I do not know how it came out when I expressed.